than that. And if they meet that, then they've done a great job. Job lists and breakdowns, that really takes it the next level deeper, where you're really focusing your training sessions on specific skill sets. Any questions so far? Employee evaluation. I used to ask my leaders to answer this question honestly for me. At any point in time when you've had to do a number of performance reviews and people's anniversary dates were coming up, and that meant you had to do their performance reviews, and you've got 6 or 7 of them to do you find those reviews a pain to do? You're too busy. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. I've got too much to do. And the people who answered honestly would say, yes, absolutely. It takes too much time to do them, and I don't understand why we always have to do them. So I would very patiently explain to them that this is probably the single most important thing you will do as a leader. And that is to take the time to sit down with your employees and have a very honest conversation about their performance. And you want them to be active participants in the performance. So when I do a performance review, as an example, I have 2 coming up after this class with 2 second-year students. They have to complete the form, the self-evaluation form that I give them. They have to provide me with the feedback on their performance, and then we have a discussion. And they give me the mark they think they deserve. And we discuss that. And if I agree with them, then that's the mark they get. If I don't agree with them, then we have another conversation. And then what I ask of that is that they give me really specific examples. You say that you're a rock star, I'll say, prove it. Give me examples of when you were provided excellent guest service. What did that excellent guest service look like? Who are the guests? Tell me about it. It also allows you to provide discussions on how productive they are. You talk about the quality of their performance, if you feel that they're doing a great job. And it also gives you an opportunity to focus on perhaps some areas that they need to work on that may be perceived as being weaknesses. So that's really, really good. But probably the most important thing from a leader's perspective is, in these conversations, this is where you can get great ideas from your employees. And this is where you can ask some really directed questions to find out, what are the guests saying about the menu? What are the guests saying about the prices? What do you think? What do you think of our training program? Is there something that is missing? Many of the ideas that we have in place in our Scholars Dining Room, which is our teaching dining room that I run with the students, many of the great ideas have come from the students through the conversations I've had with them during their performance reviews. And so it's really, really important, that your employees and you, if you're an employee, you feel valued, and that you have the opportunity to sit with your boss and have the conversation about the performance. It is also a great way to get promoted, right? So if you're going in for a performance review, and if you pass this performance review, although people don't like to say the word pass, if you are successful in this performance review, you're going to get a raise. So the more you prepare for it, the better off you're going to be. And I can't urge you enough. And when you get into these dining room classes with me, I will say to you repeatedly, give me examples. I want examples. Don't just say, oh, I heard someone say. Tell me exactly who. Then I can do something about it. As an example, when Rasika said, I spoke to a couple of people, I said, who did you speak to? And she told me. It's perfect. Now I can do something about it. When we look at some of the things that will affect work performance or affect your colleagues, menu types and the amount of items on the menu. Some menus are so big, they're just stupid. And it makes no sense to have a huge menu. And conversely, some menus are too small, and people get bored of those menus very quickly. Convenience foods for the kitchen. There are products out there that make life easier for the cooks, that's for sure. The type of service that your restaurant offers will make a difference in the work performance. Is it fast food? Is it counter service? Is it buffet? Is it French service? Is it table d'eau, 7-course, tasting menu? All of those different types of service will determine the work performance and how many people you need to schedule, and various other support positions. How busy you are by meal period. That's another big factor. Um, the layout and design of your restaurant, again, it's very important. You know, where do people store their backup cutlery? Where do they store their napkins? How accessible is it for them to get to them when they need them? So they're not having to run to the back of the kitchen to get their cutlery. It's easily accessible. Where is the beverage station set up for coffee, tea, soft drinks? How easy is it to get to them? The equipment that you have on hand is a good quality equipment. Does it make life easy for the employees? What's the labor market like in your community? You talked about location. Now, what about the labor market? Is it if you look at Vancouver as an example, third largest city in Canada, has a very vibrant restaurant scene pre-COVID and high quality restaurants. Some of the best restaurants in Canada are in Vancouver. And so the quality of service is excellent. So if you're opening a restaurant and you're looking for good service, as long as you're prepared to pay, you're going to get some good quality candidates applying. Making sure you have solid human resources practices in place. You've got great policies that are clearly explainable to your colleagues so everyone understands this is how we run our dining room. This is how we run our restaurant. In Scholars, we develop a list of values that are important, that all the students have to follow. Respect, trust, teamwork, things like that are very important. We'll look at labor cost control, identify the best and the worst of the controls in place, and somewhere in the middle is where you want to settle and say, this is what's going to work for me. This is the type of schedule I'm going to use. This is the standard for scheduling that I'm going to use. Excuse me. The staffing guide is really important. Your cost control program will define or determine how your staffing guide is going to work. And when we talk about staffing guide, we talk about how many people I need to serve the guests that are coming into my restaurant. And a staffing guide sets parameters on that. So 1 guest to 30 guests, I have 1 server. 31 guests to 59 guests, I add another server. So on and so on. Set your criteria. What determines a cover? And that varies from operation to operation. It can be 1 person is a cover. That's the general accepted what definition of what a cover is. But then what's a beverage cover? Does a beverage cover mean alcohol, or does it mean alcohol plus soft drinks and coffee? Or does coffee get charged to food? So those things you have to determine, and because then that separates it out in your point of sale system, because these point of sale systems are very intelligent and they track information for you that is incredibly useful when preparing your forecasts, preparing the budget for the next year, showing you performance of your menu. Critical. Scheduling techniques to control labor costs. Scheduling. I know of the 66 students in this class who work. At some point in time, you have worked for someone who does not know how to schedule properly. Can I get a thumbs up from someone on that? You ever worked for the boss who didn't have a clue how to schedule? Yes? I asked for Saturday off, and how come you're scheduling me on Saturday? I don't understand. My friend's getting married. I need Saturday off. Or they do the schedule and they post it the day before. Like, how do you plan for that? You can't. You're waiting. Okay, what's my schedule? What's my schedule, man? Um, Spanner shifts and on-call shifts, part-time shifts, split shifts. Those are all various types of different ways of scheduling people. And in restaurants, I'll use hotels as an example for this. In the city centers, they don't keep a full-time, they do keep a full-time banquet staff on, but it's a small staff that would service their sort of the daily functions that they have. But then they would work with probably agencies that would supply them with 30 servers that would come in on a Saturday night to serve a wedding, because they don't keep that amount of staff on hand. So they would call them in. So on call shift is something where okay, I've got Brittany, you're going to be on call for Saturday night, and I will call you by noon if I need you, if the reservations pick up. They're not great, these types of shifts, but that's the reality of our world. You go to work and you work for 3 hours and you get sent home early. That happens. As a manager, if it's not busy, you can't have people standing around brushing their hair. You have to make some decisions. You need to make sure, certainly in Canada, that you schedule breaks. You have to factor in breaks into the shift. Your shift is 8.5 hours long, but you get 30 minutes for a break, unpaid, meaning I'm paying you for 8 hours. And overtime. Overtime's good if you like overtime and you like to make money, because you get paid at a different rate when you work overtime. Some more on that. Oopsie, sorry. And the last slide, relative to your restaurant. All of these 11 slides I've just gone through would also be quite helpful with your major project. If you're looking for any ideas, or you need feel you've missed some things. Looking at why labor costs are high, you may not have had a good group of applicants, and so you've hired people that under normal circumstances you probably wouldn't hire, but that's the way it goes. And so you got to get people in your restaurant to serve your guests. You're opening in a week and you've just run out of time. Inadequate training, you haven't invested in the training. And when you don't invest in training properly, then you get people who are not going to drive your sales, and your average check is not going to be where it needs to be. These people that you've hired, because they're not the top candidates, they've got poor work habits and they're not as productive. Your supervisors aren't well trained and they're not confident, so they're not managing your employees. So now you got a double whammy here. Your supervisor doesn't know what they're doing, and the employees don't know what they're doing. And that leads to high turnover and low retention. So same thing, high turnover, low retention. High turnover is the amount of staff that turn over. And in resort hotels, as an example, Banff, Lake Louise, Jasper, Whistler, there's a very high turnover rate because seasonal work, like people do go, students in the summertime go work in the resorts on their work term. Then they come back to school. So there, you see quite a high turnover in the resorts, upwards to 80% in some resorts. 80%, that means 80% of the employees leave after a period of time. In city center properties, you see a much lower turnover rate, some as low as 6%. It's because people stay in their jobs because they like the seniority, they like the benefits, they like the company they work for, and they don't want to go find another job. When you look at your layout, your design of your operation, the type of equipment you have, that can have a really big impact on your productivity, big time. The machine's always breaking down, it slows us down, then we have to do everything by hand. That's a major pain. If you have someone who doesn't know what they're doing when they're making the schedule, that can be a nightmare. And that will lead to very serious employee problems, where it goes back to point 6, where you have your low retention. Say, why would I stay here and work here? You don't have a clue how to schedule. You never schedule the right shifts for me, despite my asking for them. So I'm going to work for someone else. And then not using the tools that you have available. The point of sales report, the sales data, not taking that and analyzing it properly and understanding the story that's being told to you, but you just can't seem to figure it out. So you have to really understand the reports that a point of sale system generates for you, because they're very important story. Any questions so far? Okay, so that leads us to the conversation about payroll, labor, and the various types of payroll and labor. And then we've got a couple of workbooks we're going to do. Okay.
David, I have a couple of questions, but it's not directly related to the assignment.
What assignment?
Hello?
Yeah, what assignment are you talking about?
It's not directly related to the restaurant project we need to do. Like my
Okay. What are the questions? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
If we are on work permit, are we legally allowed to open a restaurant in Canada?
I don't know, actually. I would say no, because you're very limited in that when you're on your work permit in Canada and you're on a student visa, you're only allowed to work 20 hours a week, and they're very strict about that. So when you do come to Canada, you'll accept it, except when you're out of, like on the summer break where you're not going to school, the break between first year and second year. That's when you do your work term. You can work full time, but other than that, you're working 20 hours a week. And so, I would say no, you would not be able to open a restaurant or a business when you're on a work visa. You would have to have your permanent residency, which most students work towards.
Okay. And my other question is, like I owned previously, I owned 2 restaurants in India. So what I used to do is students from IHM, or either the people who worked at Hyatt or Radisson and places like this. So I used to ask them what profit they gave to the previous place they work. So while we hire, can we ask such kind of questions?
You can ask questions like, how would you achieve the highest average check? What techniques do you use to generate revenues from the customers? How do you get them to buy an appetizer, main course, and dessert? What upsell techniques do you use to get the guests buying our product? Those types of questions you absolutely can ask, because you want to know if your colleagues are going to generate the revenue for you. If, as an example, if I'm interviewing someone and they're sitting looking at me and they're going, well, I would try really hard to get them to buy something. Okay, that is not, you are not winning me over with your enthusiasm. I want to, when I'm interviewing someone who's going to be looking after my guests in hospitality, I want energy, man. I want to feel a real positive vibe from the person. I love people. I like to make sure people have a good time. Okay, great. So how do you make sure they have a good time? I tell them what are my favorite dishes. I tell them what's my favorite wine. I tell them what my favorite cocktail is, why it's so good. What is the house specialty? What is the chef's favorite dish? Those types of things. Okay, does that answer your question? Was that Rasika?
And my third, yeah, it's me. And my third and the last question is, like, when I'm on work term, in my experience, can I show that I own 2 restaurants, or I should or I shouldn't? That's the question I wanted to ask.
Absolutely,
because
you should.
It was in India.
Yeah, you should.
Okay.
Absolutely, because some things in our industry know no borders, right?
Okay.
Service in India and service in the Philippines and in Canada and the United States and Europe, good service is timeless, and there are certain components to what makes good service, and then there's components what makes great service. So they'll absolutely want to see your experience, whatever your experience on your resume is, ladies and gentlemen. You want to make sure that you outline that in your resume. I have owned 2 restaurants in India, and give maybe just a brief overview of the restaurants, how many seats, et cetera, and be prepared to answer questions about it. Not a problem.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Great questions. So in the learning objectives here, we're going to talk about compensation and the principal types of compensation. I'm going to explain to you direct and indirect compensation. And impact, I'm going to explain the impact on what determines labor costs and the percentage of labor costs. We'll have a little conversation about labor costs and percentages between establishments, and then we're going to talk about labor cost controls. Pretty basic. Okay. Employee compensation. What do you think is a direct compensation? What do you think is an indirect compensation? And what do you think is deferred compensation? So go into your chat rooms and start writing some ideas down quickly. Just go boom, 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 boom. Brain, like release your thoughts in the chat room.